Despite our popular myths, the Canadian Armed Forces have a long history of private cooperation, with both the Princess Patricia Canadian Light Infantry and the Lord Strathcona Horse being formed by private individuals before the First World War and the Boer War, respectively. Canada has been involved in what some scholars call an illegal invasion and occupation of Afghanistan for almost 9 years now. The effects on the Canadian forces have been huge, one of the primary ones being the privitisation creeping into the Canadian forces. This has been abetted by the very comfortable relationship between senior commanders and industry. The cost to Canada in terms of young Canadian lives has been huge, with 154 dead and literally thousands injured. CUTV looks at 3 specific instances of this growing trend, which will not only change Canada's military, but maybe our society as a whole. This is Brigadier General Kelly Woyden. He is second in command of Land Force Western Area, all of the Canadian Army from Ontario to British Columbia. As a commander of a major formation, he sits in the councils that decide what equipment to purchase for the Canadian Armed Forces. Brigadier General Woyden is not a regular force soldier. He's a reserve soldier, and as such he has a day job. His day job is as a salesman for the Materials Composite Division of Bristol Aerospace Winnipeg, a firm that has just been awarded a multi-million-dollar contract as part of the $16 billion F-35 contract. The part of the contract awarded to Bristol Aerospace is for the vertical stabilizers of the plane. These stabilizers are made out of composite materials, the very division for which Brigadier General Woyden works. General Ernst Bino, a former commander of the disgraced Airborne Regiment, went to work for Pacific Architects and Engineering of California. They, together with SNC-Lavalin, a massive company from Montreal, Quebec, have negotiated a multi-million-dollar contract to supply logistic support to the Canadian Armed Forces. This wholly owned Canadian company also manufactures bullets for the United States Marine Corps used in Iraq. There's also the interesting case of retired Colonel Pierre LeBlanc.
Okay, Colonel Pierre LeBlanc, you were commander of the Arctic region of Canada from 1995 to the year 2000, and since then you've been involved in resource issues in that area of Canada. What are the changes that you've seen since 1995 to now?
Well, certainly from the sovereignty point of view, there's been a significant shift from the interest of the Canadian government into our Arctic sovereignty. The factor that I think has changed the most is the global warming and its impact on the Northwest Passage.
What Colonel LeBlanc isn't telling you is that he retired from the Canadian Armed Forces in September 2000, and in September 2000 he went on the Board of Governors of Davik Mines Incorporated up in the Arctic as Vice President of Corporate Affairs, a post he held until 2003. In 2003 he left that post to form Canadian Diamond Consultants Incorporated, and on his website he boasts of his extensive contacts in the diamond industry and government. Mr. LeBlanc also meets regularly with the Conservative-dominated Parliament in order to push for more money for defense in the Arctic. This includes the building of bases and the purchasing of armed drones to patrol Canadian skies. These drones are similar to Predator drones used by the United States in both Iraq and Afghanistan as they are armed and directed by satellite. Mr. LeBlanc has also been involved in this aspect. One
of the new assets that has improved our capability for doing surveillance significantly is the operationality of the Radar Sat-2, which gives us now coverage of the Arctic from space.
This trend toward privatization has even led to Canada hiring private security companies with horrible human rights records, such as Blackwater, to protect both VIPs and our embassy in Afghanistan.
How do you view the increase in, I would have to say, the privatization of the forces?
The positive one would be that it would generally bring in economy of scale. Continuity in service. The military, and you've experienced that, there's a lot of movement of personnel. Quite often you lose some of the expertise, the corporate knowledge. If a service is provided by a service provider, more than likely that will be mitigated to a large extent because there's going to be some stability with that company. It should, in theory, in any case, be cheaper to provide the services through a contractor that is done on a contractual basis.
Many within the armed forces, including Colonel LeBlanc, acknowledged the problems with increased privatization.
Are you then a mercenary or a representative of the state? And if you're a private contractor, in my views, I'm not sure that the Geneva Convention would completely apply.
Right.
So that's a concern. The other concern would be the loss of capability. If the armed forces were to go a sort of full-out war and need first line, second line maintenance in a theater of operation, would the military have the capability to reacquire the knowledge required to be able to do that?
As you are bombarded by the images surrounding this year's celebration of Remembrance Day, take time to think about what the real forces shaping Canadian foreign policy and spending young Canadian lives are. This has been William Ray, a combat veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces, reporting for Concordia University Television.